Hello and welcome to Real Watchers Movie Club. My name is Garrett.
And I'm Kevin.
And we are your hosts. Movie Club is a show where we pick a movie every week and discuss it just like a book club. On today's show, we are covering the samurai drama Harakiri. Our thoughts and more coming up on Movie Club. Released in 1962, Harakiri was directed by Masaki Kobayashi and stars Tatsuya Nakadai, Akira Ishihama, and Shima Iwashita. Sorry if there's any mispronunciation of those names. When a ronin requesting seppuku at a feudal lord's palace is told of the brutal suicide of another ronin who previously visited, he reveals how their pasts are intertwined, and in doing so, challenges the clan's integrity. It is currently ranked 44 on IMDb's top 250 and currently has a 4.7 out of 5 on Letterboxd and is ranked number 1 on its top 250. Before we dive into our thoughts though on this movie, and sounds like we are going to have a lot of them, we do want to issue a spoiler warning for this film. We will be discussing everything that happens in it. There's a pretty major twist that happens about 2/3 of the way through this movie. So if you don't want to know it, please go and watch it. You might have to rent it, or if you have the Criterion channel, it is available to stream there. Stay tuned to the end of the show to find out what movie we'll be covering next week, because it's actually going to be a trilogy that lasts 3 weeks. That's all I'm going to tell you right now. Alrighty, Kevin. So this is a big one. And why we say it's a big one is because it is probably, I think it's the highest ranked movie that we've watched on Letterboxd, which, I mean, you don't get higher ranked than this one. It is the number 1 highest ranked narrative feature film on Letterboxd.
Yeah,
which is nuts.
Yeah, it's a little scary coming into it, because if you don't like it, you might get some backlash from it. But we all have our own opinions on this.
Hey, movies are art, it's all right, So, but this was my pick this week, and I think for obvious reasons, because it's number 1 on Letterboxd. It's also very highly ranked on IMDb as well at 44, and that's really the reason why I picked it. I was like, we gotta watch it. It's number 1. I don't believe that you've had the pleasure of seeing Seven Samurai yet. I know it is coming up on our schedule, and so there might be some comparisons to that movie that I'll make while I'm speaking about it. Not in any kind of bad way, and I'm not saying that the two are one like is better than the other or whatever, but just those comparisons may come up. So there may be some spoilers for Seven Samurai as well, but I'll try and keep my mouth shut. Yeah, so I had just selected this movie based on that. Had you heard the movie before we decided to cover it?
I have seen it on the number 1 spot on Letterboxd, but that is all that I know of it. I have not heard of any synopsis or anything like that. So I was very interested going into it, because this is probably my first samurai movie that I've watched. So,
and it's quite the one to get started with.
I think so, because I heard, isn't Seven Samurai like a 3-hour movie or something like that?
It's close to 3 hours. But it's one of those ones, honestly, like that movie, you don't feel it.
You don't feel it. Yeah. Well, like with this one, it's an hour less, and you don't feel it when you're watching this movie. It goes by very, very smooth, and you don't realize the time has elapsed as much as you thought. Because during the middle of this movie, I was watching it on my laptop, and an hour into it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I only have an hour left. So, which is always good with movies for me, not to show its time.
Yeah, like when you, it's always nice when you're like in the movie and you don't realize how much time has passed. And it was actually one of those things. Like I'm very guilty of, like, when I'm watching a movie at home, not in theater, I will pull out my phone and I'll pull up the Letterboxd or something to like check what was that actor's name, what's that character's name or whatever, or like, something if it's boring, right? Or if I'm not really engaged in that moment. I never did for this movie, and I never actually was able to see the time. So and I never paused the movie either, so I never knew where I was. And I think I maybe left the room one time. So I did pause it once, and I left the room, but I made sure not to look at how much time was left, because I was like, I'm too engrossed. Yeah. I don't know where I was going with that statement, but it holds your attention very well. And I don't know about you, but we'll just go ahead and start talking about the movie. But it caught my attention in the first 10 minutes, like within the first 10, and just did not let me go.
Let's see, like the first part for me was a little bit slow until you get to the actual, I would not say second part, but like the end of the first part where you get to meet our main character. And he starts talking about his backstory. That's when the movie starts for me. But it's nice at the beginning talking about is it Harakiri? Is that how you say it?
Harakiri, I think.
Harakiri. How it actually is done, and it demonstrates. So that was interesting, like a history fact. But then it goes into the story and stuff, like stuff happens, and then it picks up from there.
I think for me, it caught me immediately just because, you know, we as Westerners, as Americans, we don't really get exposed to a lot of culture. So it was really interesting to see a little bit more of a depth behind samurai culture and like the whole honor dynamic, right? Like, oh, you want to kill yourself? That's noble. Like, it's so like reversed from what we here in the U.S. kind of think in modern day, most of the world, I would actually say. So like, you know, it caught me immediately that the clan, I think it's the Iwi clan, I forget the name of it. They are just on top of it because they know that there are people who will like scam them, essentially.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you're just saying that so we'll give you money and you'll go away. And I was like, okay, so do we trust this guy? And then it flashes back to his protege or his like nephew, or like basically it's like his godson, essentially. And which we don't know. We don't know that until later in the movie, which is the big twist. Which was, I don't know about you, but I was like, oh.
When I was kind of getting into it, I was like, wait, he must know this person. So, because why would this be in the beginning of the movie and have it tie into something? So I kind of had it in the back of my mind, but still, it was just like, oh, that's like a good, like, it was a teaser. It's a teaser trailer, and then you get the whole movie afterwards.
Yeah, and it was weird because like when the main character, I'm gonna look up his name real quick so I don't get it wrong. Hanshiro Sugumo. When he is looking for his second, right, the one that will behead him.
Yeah.
And he's purposefully choosing 3 people.
That was cool.
And I was like, that must have something to do with it. But then I was just getting so roped into it that like I completely forgot that those 3 were involved with the, you know, his protege or whatever. And like I didn't even re-click with me until he starts throwing out the top knots, and it's like, oh
yeah.
And also credit to the movie for not going like the revenge kill route. In their culture, he did something far worse.
Yeah, which is cool. And then I forgot what I was gonna say. Never mind. Keep going.
But like one of the biggest things for me, and I'll just come out and say it. I'll kind of spoil my full review. I think this is one of the best movies I've seen in a long time, and it is a masterpiece in my opinion. One of the biggest things that it does so well, among many things, is the camera in this movie. The way that things are framed, the way that things are shot is gorgeous, and it almost doesn't look like a 60s movie. In many different ways, it does feel like we've been transported back in time.
Oh, yeah. Well, especially the scene through the graveyard before the big samurai fight. That was gorgeous. Them just and how even the graves, the tombs are and stuff, how it would just ease in, like it was a part of the scene. It's not just a background of a scene, which I always thought of in movies. Sometimes there's just backgrounds in a scene, but this was a part of the scene.
It was gorgeous. The way that everything is laid out, like the actual courtyard where people are allowed to do the act of harakiri, which we won't say the English version of what that word is because that could get us, flagged on YouTube. But like that courtyard is just beautifully made. Like it's like everything is laid out in a way where like you kind of know what things are, but you don't really know.
And I like how it's not a close up of our main character. You can see other people on the background as well. It's not fixated on like you should be paying attention to this main character, but there's other people that are involved in it, and it's the whole clan. So I like when they not zoom in, but they like put attention to our main character, but then puts the attention to the clan leader, and he gets a spotlight to shine pretty much.
Yes, and I don't know, man. It's fascinating.
It is.
Like it's just endlessly fascinating, and the performances are very good here too. They're not like bombastically over the top. This isn't like your stereotypical, Japanese samurai. I mean, in many ways, it kind of like sets the standard. This and Seven Samurai and Rashomon and all these movies, but like they're more reserved, and in like any mostly like popular drama film, it escalates as it goes on, and you start to see more and more of these characters come out as they are there longer, and as the truth starts to come out. It all starts very cordial, very formal, and then once the emotions start to kick in, and like these samurai have no honor anymore, and like all that, like it reaches that fever pitch, and that final fight sequence is well, there's two final fight sequences. There's that I want to talk about. The first one is the duel with the swordsman.
Yep.
In the graveyard hillside, like beautifully shot.
Yeah, I wonder
Like-
if that wind was generated or was that like natural wind, because that looked way too hard to have it be a artificial wind because of how heavy the wind was. I was trying to figure that out the entire time.
I have no idea. Like, it's just gorgeous. Like the way, like it is so beautifully done, and you can see that, these are, like this is a master of doing sequences like that, of like showing what's important. Like the director is really, really doing a whole lot there, and it is just absolutely gorgeous. I
loved how it wasn't busy. It was like when they're walking through the graveyard, if they had the duel in there, I think it would be a little bit too busy because people would be looking at the headstones and stuff like that. But having it in a nice meadow with wind going on, there's nothing else that you can draw your eye to, so you have to focus on the two characters that are dueling.
Yeah, exactly. It's gorgeous, and then that leads into obviously the final fight, the big one with Tsugomo versus the entire clan. And I mean, by the end of everything, we want him to win. I mean, in some way, but he doesn't. And in some ways, it's that kind of it's that pulling the rug out from underneath you feeling of like, you're rooting for Tsugomo the whole time. Maybe like after you hear why he is who he is and all that. We're not rooting for anyone to commit that act.
Yeah.
But it's just like once it actually happens, and it's just like you're just watching the last moments, the final moments, and then like after everything that's been done, they still choose to honor him by saying that he did the act of doing harakiri or seppuku, which is they're the same thing. Which I didn't know. I didn't know what harakiri was until this movie. I had heard the word before.
I looked it up on Google. I'm like, no, that's the other word that we're not going to say. And I was like, oh, that's actually what it means.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just kind of funny, like like that rug pull, right? Like you'd expect them to be like, oh no, he was a terrible guy. He is responsible for this death and this. No. Like he, they let him die with honor. And the same with the three who had their top knots removed. Absolutely savage, by the way, when he tells his second to go. He's like, go back and make sure that they do that to themselves. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh boy, like, which is like that's the culture, right? Like
Hmm.
that's like your pride and joy, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it's just absolutely, it's a heart wrenching ending almost because you're just like, in
You
some ways you're
wanted him
like,
to prevail, but
yeah,
but sometimes in movies, sometimes the bad guy has to win, or the bad clan, or the bad outcome has to prevail, because
hmm
it's not all sunshine and rainbows sometimes, especially in real world. So I liked
yeah,
that aspect of it's like, okay, there are consequences to what he did. He still gets his memorable happening, and but it's what the way he wanted to go out, and the storytelling that he did before it was probably the way he wanted to tell his story.
hmm yeah, and it's just meticulously planned out.
Hmm.
Like he knows what he's doing when he goes there, and in hindsight, like the reactions of people when he's asking for those 3 specific seconds
Yeah.
is just fantastic. But
Hmm.
yeah, beautifully acted. It's just the movie is shot so immaculately. And then yeah, I think it's also just this movie, like we said earlier, like the fact that you're engrossed for 2 hours. It's paced very well for a movie that is mostly just talking and like culturally relevant scenes.
Hmm. Yeah, very heavy dialogue, but that's okay, because that's what brings you in and grabs you and holds you on until the end of the movie.
Exactly. And you just stay completely engaged the entire time. And that is, you know, people like to, hate on older movies, which there's no justification for that whatsoever. This movie held my attention more better than, like, I would say at least 60% of the movies that came out in 2023.
Hmm.
It's
And,
just magical.
and people hate on the subbed. Don't worry about,
Yeah.
just read them. It's okay. Like you're missing out on great movies because you don't want to read subtitles.
Yeah. You're like, challenge yourself. I mean, I get it. Most people want to go to a movie to be entertained,
Of course.
right? And this movie is very much entertaining, I would say,
Hmm.
in maybe a different way. It's not like your popcorn munching blockbuster or your superhero
It's not
movie
like
or
Godzilla minus one. It's not an action that everybody's talking about. This is an older movie that has been appraised uh,
yeah,
to number one, pretty much.
exactly. So it's like you should challenge yourself every once in a while. And I would say this movie is not. This movie doesn't have a barrier to entry. Like
No.
this doesn't feel like it doesn't have like the 3 hour water like the length. It doesn't have you know like a cultural thing that is so hard to understand.
Yeah.
Like at least most people at least have known or have heard of like seppuku or
Hmm.
harakiri, or like have some understanding of like honor and samurai, right? So it's like there has to be a little bit of interest there, and it's just fantastic. I would maybe I don't know if this is like the first like older foreign film that I would recommend. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I
Hmm.
always used to say Seven Samurai, but I know a lot of people don't want to sit in their chair for 3 hours.
Yeah.
So, this one is probably more something that I would recommend for a new viewer. I'm trying to think of something I would say that's like better first, but that's just going to take some
I
time to think of.
Yeah.
So, alrighty. So we have reached the end of what we want to talk about. So since this was my pick, Kevin, let's go ahead and give your thoughts real quick. Maybe a score, what you gave it on Letterboxd, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. Well, my final thoughts are very good, engaging movie. Uh, can't feel the time limit of this, which you should never feel a time limit of a good movie. Very heavy dialogue, which I personally like. Um, and I gave this 4.5 stars out of 5. I give it a 95, but I'm not a big of a critic as some other people are. So I sat down and watched this movie and thought it was a good movie, which is always my biggest takeaway from watching a movie. Would I watch this again? Maybe in a couple years, but I wouldn't watch it sooner than that. So that's why I gave it a 95.
Sure. I kind of spoiled earlier how I think about this movie, but I think this movie is just from beginning to end. I think it's as close to perfection as you can truly get. No movie is perfect. Even movies that get 100 out of 100, they aren't necessarily perfect. I mean, it's art. It's in the eye of the beholder. To me, it's perfect. I I really love this movie. I immediately was looking around trying to find, whatever best version collector's edition I could get of this movie to put in my collection. And honestly, if I find, or if I'm looking for a movie to show someone, or they want something they haven't seen before, this is going to be towards the top of my recommendations. I really think it is that good, and I think it's a great way to kind of show people, like, what film can be, no matter how simple it may look on the outside. Oh, it's a black and white, it's a foreign film. It is so much deeper and so much more perfectly structured and just well made. So I gave it 100 out of 100, which equates to a 5 out of 5 on Letterboxd, and it joins the Prestige Club in my list there. Absolutely, thoroughly love this movie. So the question now falls to you. Have you seen Harakiri, and what did you think? Please go ahead and leave your thoughts and reviews and comments in the section down below. But remember to be respectful of one another. It is the new year. Try and be nice every once in a while. It'll do you some wonders. As far as what we're doing next, over the next 3 weeks, we will be covering the original Star Wars trilogy, which all 3 movies are on IMDb's top 250. So that is why we'll be covering all 3 of them. We'll be doing Star Wars A New Hope next week, then Empire Strikes Back after that, and then Return of the Jedi following that. So make sure to watch those if you haven't seen them before, which is probably not a whole lot of you. But if you don't want any spoilers, obviously go check them out. They're all on Disney+. You can check them out there. And again, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to us here on YouTube, and follow us everywhere on social media at Reel Watchers. That is REEL Watchers. As a part of the new year, we're going to be pushing some new kinds of content out to various platforms, not just here on YouTube. So make sure you're following us everywhere. And until next time, make sure to keep your eyes on the screen.